There's a strange trap that only catches the smartest people in the room. The people who ace the interview and then replay every word of it at 2 a.m. The ones who can solve a differential equation but can't decide which email reply sounds too cold. The friend who's read every book on decision-making and still can't pick a restaurant. We call it overthinking, but that word doesn't explain why it happens almost exclusively to people with sharp, capable minds. Why does more intelligence sometimes produce less certainty? By the end of this video, you'll understand the exact mechanism in your brain that turns thinking, your greatest asset, into your own worst enemy. And you'll learn the one shift researchers have found actually breaks the loop. Here's the paradox. Evolution built the human brain to solve problems by simulating them, running scenarios forward before we act, so we don't have to learn from real, physical mistakes. That's a superpower. It's why humans build bridges instead of just falling off enough cliffs to learn gravity. But that same simulation engine has no off switch. Once it's good at running scenarios, it doesn't stop at good enough. It keeps running them, again and again, looking for the scenario where nothing can possibly go wrong. The smarter and more capable someone is, the more scenarios their brain can generate, which sounds like an advantage, until you realize each new scenario is just one more reason to hesitate. Psychologists have a name for the mental habit underneath overthinking: rumination. Repetitively cycling through the same thoughts without reaching resolution. A landmark study from Susan Nolen-Hoeksema at Yale found that rumination doesn't just fail to solve problems, it actively makes it harder to solve them by consuming the exact mental resources, working memory, attention, needed for actual decision-making. There's a second ingredient: intolerance of uncertainty. Research led by psychologist Dugas and colleagues found that people who overthink don't actually fear the bad outcome the way you'd expect. They fear not knowing the outcome. The unknown itself is the threat. So the brain keeps generating more thoughts, hoping one more lap will produce certainty. It never does, because some things are simply unknowable in advance. The loop isn't searching for an answer anymore. It's just spinning. And here's the twist that explains the smart people pattern specifically. Intelligence correlates with something called metacognition, thinking about your own thinking. That's usually a strength. It lets you catch your own errors. But turned inward, without limits, metacognition becomes self-surveillance. You're not just having a thought, you're having a thought, then judging that thought, then judging your judgment of the thought. Each layer feels like extra diligence. It's actually extra weight. Brain imaging backs this up. Studies using fMRI show that excessive rumination is linked to hyperactivity in the default network, the brain regions active when we're self-focused and not engaged with the outside world, combined with reduced activity in regions tied to decisive, goal-directed action. In other words, the thinking about myself system revs up right as the get-it-done system quiets down. Consider the well-documented case of decision paralysis among surgical residents, some of the most intelligent, highly trained people in any profession. Research on clinical decision-making has found that experienced physicians facing ambiguous cases sometimes take longer to decide than less experienced ones. Not because they know less, but because they can see more of what could go wrong. Their expertise generates more branches on the decision tree. Or take a simpler, more universal example: choosing what to text back after a first date. A person with an average level of self-reflection sends the message and moves on. A chronic overthinker's brain treats it like a chess grandmaster analyzing a tournament match, running each possible phrasing forward through imagined outcomes, imagined reactions, imagined regrets. The tragic part is the outcome is almost always the same either way. The thinking didn't change the result, it just delayed it and made it exhausting. This is why overthinking is sometimes called the tax intelligent people pay for being good at thinking. The tool that lets you solve hard problems is the same tool that, left unchecked, makes trivial problems feel hard. In one revealing study, researchers had participants make a series of decisions under two conditions: unlimited time to deliberate or a hard time limit. Counter to what most people would predict, decision satisfaction, how good people felt about their choice afterward, was not higher in the unlimited time group. For many participants, it was lower. More time to think didn't produce more confidence. It produced more doubt, because it gave the mind more opportunities to generate alternatives it then had to rule out. This lines up with a broader finding in decision science known as the paradox of choice. Past a certain point, more options and more deliberation reduce satisfaction rather than increasing it, because the brain starts weighing the cost of every road not taken. So if more thinking isn't the fix, what is? The research points to a strategy called implementation intentions, deciding in advance the conditions under which you'll stop deliberating and act. Not I'll think about it until I feel sure, but I'll gather information until Thursday. Then I choose, regardless of how certain I feel. This works because it removes the open-ended search for certainty that the rumination loop feeds on. You're no longer asking, have I thought enough? An unanswerable question. You're asking, has the deadline arrived? A question with a clear answer. A second, simpler tool that clinical psychologists use with rumination-prone clients is called the worry window. A fixed, short daily time slot, say 10 minutes, where deliberate overthinking is not just allowed, but scheduled. Outside that window, the thought gets a one-line note and is deliberately postponed to the next window. Studies on this technique show it doesn't suppress the thoughts, which rarely works. It contains them, and containment turns out to be far more sustainable than suppression. The third shift is the most counterintuitive, treating the feeling of uncertainty itself as tolerable, rather than as a problem to be solved before acting. Because the anxious brain isn't actually asking what's the right choice, it's asking, can I make a choice without being 100% sure? And the honest, research-backed answer is yes, because almost no decision in life is made at 100% certainty, including the ones made by the most successful, decisive people you know. They didn't get more certain. They got more comfortable acting without it. So the smart people who overthink everything aren't broken, and they aren't uniquely anxious. They're running a simulation engine that evolution never gave an off switch, a tool built to protect them that, past a certain point, starts working against them. The goal was never to think less. Intelligence is not the problem. The goal is to notice the exact moment when thinking stops gathering information and starts just generating more reasons to stay stuck, and to have, ready in advance, a rule for stepping out of the loop. Because the smartest move a smart mind can make isn't finding the perfect answer. It's knowing when a good enough answer, chosen on time, beats a perfect one that arrives too late to matter. If you've ever caught yourself replaying a 5-minute conversation for 3 days, you already know exactly which brain this video was talking about. The question now isn't whether you overthink, it's what you'll do the next time you catch the loop starting.